So I just opened an article, and because like you and I just said, right, this topic that we're picking on today is so interesting. It's so black box, and it's so terrifying to some, but it's also so technical and interesting from a tech side that we could go almost anywhere in our conversation, which, as both of us know, is going to be interesting today. So I opened an article, and I didn't get a chance to share this one with you. So I'm gonna see if I can explain a little. What I liked the title, and I think it's a cool place to start. And the title is DALL-E, Midjourney, and Jasper Art a Scam? I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I'm like, okay.
You got the hook. All right.
Yeah. And I'm like, I like this. And it says a potentially groundbreaking new way of turning text into images using artificial intelligence. Is it a scam or the future of images and photos? Now, it says in here that, we're looking at tools like Midjourney and Jasper Art and Night Cafe, Starry AI, and Crayon. Cool names for all these, I think, at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Now, the looks like the article came from a post that says, why is DALL-E a scam? And it says, using millions of investors, DALL-E has harvested vast amounts of human creativity, which it did not pay for and does not own or credit, and demands ownership over whatever you make or find with it. Really, it's your finding, right? Because it takes pieces of other pieces of art and pulls them together to create a graphic image. So it's really not creating it as an artist. It's creating it by stealing from other artists. There was a book once I read, a very good, quick little book in an airport, and it was called How to Steal Like an Artist. I don't know if you've ever read it.
No.
And what's great in there is he talks about if you take from one artist, it's stealing. If you take from a lot of artists, it's being inspired by.
Well, and that's really the question. And I fully believe there is a major reckoning coming for AI from a legal perspective. Like, we've already talked about it in a couple of our past episodes where, I think it was Sarah Silverman is suing with a host of other people is suing OpenAI for, and there's a whole, I forget the name of the attorney, but there's a whole law firm that's basically dedicated to it.
Okay.
Where, because what her point is I can go ask, ChatGPT to summarize my book, and it can. Which means that my book was a part of its training data. And my book is not free. It is my intellectual property that you can purchase for a price.
Correct. You're paying my hours and my hard work for that knowledge. Like, you're paying for my time. Right.
Well, and that's where this gets super, super interesting, because, to go back to the images, when you see a lot of the images that they've created, you can still see watermarks in them.
Well, that's where the bigger problem comes from. You're stealing my art, and now you're even leaving my watermark, and you're still not giving me credit, and you're also not paying me for my work.
Right. And that's where things get really, really gray. And I think it's worse from an image perspective than a words perspective. And I know that a lot of people would probably disagree with that, but this is like,
so to your point, right? What was the rule for text? Because graphics is different, because
it is.
As a photographer, I can say that you cannot use any part of my image. Right? It's 100%. Right. That image is mine. I took it. It's my eye that took that. You need to pay me to use my image. And I've had friends get their images stolen, per se, and used in somebody's marketing content, where they had to later on go and sue them to get paid for that image being used.
Yeah.
But my text, when I write my articles, you can pick out a certain percentage from my article, and it's okay. You can use, I think, 70 or something percent. I actually want to look that up. There's a certain percentage of text that you're allowed to keep, and the rest you have to reword in your own words. and it's no longer plagiarism.
Yeah, it's called general use laws is what it really falls under. And you see, like, you can see it in like YouTube and videos and stuff where you can use a certain segment, like a couple of seconds of a movie or something like that.
Or
you just
a
have
piece
to
of music or something, right?
That's right. You just have to give credit and all of those other things as to where it came from. Things start getting very murky when you start making money off of that, where it's like, now you've used my intellectual property to make money. Now, does that still fall under like general use protections or not?
Well, I think once you start making money, it changes the rules. And if we be,
that's right.
Is pedantic the right word I want? If we're going to be pedantic about it, I think that's the right word I want. If not, it's going to be fun because I'm going to be told that it was the wrong word. But let's say I write a book or artwork. I take a picture or something else, and I spent nights and weekends, and I locked myself in a hotel room, and I ended up getting divorced for it, and it ruined half my life. But I got this great book, and it did really well.
That sounds oddly specific.
No, maybe not. And so I've given blood, sweat, and tears is the way I'm thinking, right? Now, if you go make money off of that, I don't think that's right. Most people don't think that's right. And that's the path, kind of the question, where your question is going. Like what I hear from what you're saying is, should you be able to make money off my book and my intellectual capital, which I just had that life journey to gain? Because you did nothing to gain it. You pasted and copied my content.
That's right. And I think it really comes down to, well, I don't know what it really comes down to be honest about it, because they're in the, well, actually, so I was trying to do some lookups here. The word I was actually using is fair use, not general use. Fair use yes, is fair really use. What it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so, the way that it's defined from what I've seen is, and I'm just reading this verbatim. In some countries like the US, there's a doctrine called fair use, which allows limited use of copyrighted material without permission for purposes like criticism, comment, news reporting, education, scholarship, or research. Whether use is fair depends on factors including the purpose of the use, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount and substantiality of the portion used, and the potential market impact. It's a complex area of law and often determined by case-by-case basis. So even that is really, really murky.
Right. But I think, even though many people might say, law is fair or unfair, but let's say with all that aside, I think it's being fair. I think it's saying that it's based on the situation. Because I once got a job. I had gotten an interview for a job. And the person interviewing me was using my articles to write their school paper. Mm-hmm. Right? I had no issue with that. And not because I was interviewing for the job. I thought it was the coolest job interview I ever had. But it was really cool that they were using it and they weren't getting paid, but they were advancing their knowledge. The person who was doing that was a very smart individual, decided he was going to go back for another degree. He was working on that. My articles happened to be the same context for the article he was writing. I thought that was kind of cool. I would never have an issue with that and say, oh, that's a copyright issue. Even if you copied most of it because you were doing it for an academic reason. Now, if you were making $20 million off of it because you just went and wrote a bestseller book, then, I'd ask to be, compensated a bit on that because I just helped you to write that book.
Well, there's also the concept of public domain, and
that's a touchy one.
What is being, so what you're describing there is your work, but did you release it into the public domain? Yes or no? Like, and it goes down to, like, in the open source world, you have all the different licenses and those kinds of things of what you can and can't use. Like, most people, if they're going to create a blog of some sort, don't have, proper protections when it comes to what they're actually producing.
Right. So that's an interesting topic in itself. And for the mere fact that if I have a blog post and I like to publish my pictures, or I publish my articles, or I publish any piece of content, it is not public domain, even though it's in the public.
That's right. Yeah, because it's still associated with you. It's not like, it's where, things generally fall into public domain after they have, things are copyrighted for X amount of years, depending on what country and all the other things that you're in. But once that's done, unless you're Walt Disney, things fall into the public domain that can then be used by whomever.
Correct, right. It's a collection of creative works that are no longer protected by copyright. That means that anyone can use it without permission, including copyright distribution or adaptation. So things like Lord of the Rings. It's usually
30 years in the US.
I think, right? And things like Lord of the Rings and some of the other really famous books and stuff, the estate continues to try to renew that so that people don't have access to change those components.
That's right. Well, and that's where things start getting murky. And I made a joke about Walt Disney, but there's actually been, some of the really old Disney things should be in the public domain now.
Anything from 1923.
Yeah. And there's they've changed laws and they've changed all kinds of things specific to it. It's really, really bizarre when it comes actually down to it.
My understanding is life of the author for writing anyway, life of the author plus 70 years.
There you go. Yeah. And what's the Christmas movie that is played at like 24 hours a day all the time?
Oh, oh, wow.
It's the one with like the Christmas Story. Well, I don't remember the name of the movie because I'm not a movie guy.
But as soon as you said that, I can see the black and white movie in my head. It's A Wonderful Life.
No, that's not the one I'm thinking of. It's a different one. But the story is that the movie, when the movie was actually created, nobody cared.
You're thinking National Lampoon's
It was a terrible
Christmas
movie. And when it had run its course and had become into the public domain.
Okay.
And you go back 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when you actually had TV shows that had to be run. It wasn't just like now where they just play stuff all day long, but you actually had to have things that ran.
Yeah.
They would run that movie on a loop because it was free. And because it had moved into the open domain.
Didn't have to pay for it to play it. Yeah. But that is the movie, like the Wonderful Life is 1946.
And it became super famous because everyone started playing it all the time to fill up the air.
Well, keep in mind, back then it wasn't digital where we had a little bit more control. You were playing it in a different way where for people to have the day off to go spend with their families for Christmas, you were either black or whatever they called it, right when you went off the air, or you did, like you said, you looped the movie until everybody came back to work the next day. Right. But the movies that are really famous for Christmas that I'm aware of anyway, was like The Wonderful Life, The Christmas Story, which is when he puts his tongue on the pole, and his tongue gets stick to the pole, and don't shoot your eye out with the BB gun. Right.
So it's A Wonderful Life is the movie. So I found an article. It is that one.
Okay.
It is. So, oops. Hold, please. I need to sign in to see this, to read this article from my friends at the Wall Street Journal. It was A Wonderful Life, and The Wonderful
which is 1946. So it's definitely, past that. I think it's past that time period.
Let's see here.
It plays every year for Christmas.
Okay. So, so at the time when it was released, movies were protected by copyright of 28 years, and the copyright holder could file paperwork to renew it for another 28 years. So it was a reasonable thing to renew it.
Especially for that movie. It does play every year at Christmas.
Yeah. So It's a Wonderful Life entered the public domain in 1974.
And if you guys hear my bird in the background, sorry, because he's being very vocal right now and decided he wants to sing an opera.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So is that movie, can you see from what you just searched, is it actually in the public domain at this point, or is it?
It is. Yeah,
renewed?
it became in the public domain in 1974.
74. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's one of the reasons why it was played so often. But when it was actually released, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. But
yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
We're not chewing gum. As long as we're not chewing gum and walking, we're good. So
right. But it's actually become far more popular now than when it was released, because of it being in the public domain and being played all the time.
Well, and an interesting conversation point, and maybe something that's different, but would you say it's because of that, or would you say it's become a cult classic because it was played for free, everyone saw it, it became a Christmas theme, like you had to watch this? Yeah. And so is it more because it became a cult classic, so it had a cult following, or do you think it was truly because it became free and they played it all the time, or do you feel like one cried
I think
the
it
other?
became a cult classic because it was free and it was played all the time.
I agree.
And then people started to look back on it as like, oh, we used to watch this every day when I was a kid through Christmas because it was the only thing that was on. Yep. And so it just became a tradition, and people started to love it. Yep. And it's more famous now than it ever was.
I don't love it. I liked it. I don't know if you like it or love it. Have you watched it?
I've seen it a couple of times, but I don't, honestly, I couldn't even tell you I couldn't tell you anything about the plot. I get all of those movies mixed up because I don't watch them very often.
Okay. It's a nice storyline. It's a very nice storyline. It's very,
isn't this one black and white?
Yes, black and white. It's wholesome, old school.
I always get this one and the leg lamp one mixed up.
Oh, they're different. Yeah, the leg lamp is the last National Lampoon, is much more fun.
Is it? No, that's the one. The leg lamp's the one with the kid with the BB gun.
Is that? No. Oh yeah, I guess it also has that, doesn't it? Yes. So that one's the
Red Rider. You're gonna
Christmas
shoot your
Story,
eye out.
1983, I think. Christmas Story. I haven't watched that one in
We've
forever.
really gone off the rails with this one.
That's Ralphie with the Red Rider BB gun.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, now I know what I'm doing when Christmas comes around. I haven't watched a bunch of these. Then might as well watch Miracle on 34th Street at that point. And Home Alone. Everybody has to watch Home Alone. Why not?
Home Alone. Yeah. Yeah.
So I let's take a twist on what we're talking about here a little bit, because and before we do that though, actually, to what you were saying before, I found an article from the New York Times that also explained the fight over AI artwork. A judge had rejected copyright claims. So it said a federal judge rejected an attempt to copyright artwork generated from AI in a decision. It said last week, this was August 21st of 2023. Which provided insight into the broader legal war over authorship and intellectual property, right? Because things you create with AI, like at least the graphics, should not be intellectual property. Just because you take everyone else's private work and make a new version of it, it shouldn't be, you can't own that. Like, that's ridiculous.
I would say that you didn't even create it.
Correct. I asked a couple questions to an AI generator.
Yeah. Like, hey, give me a horse flying over the moon, on a broomstick. Like that. Yeah. Like that to me is not.
No, it undermines
really
the work of the creators,
that.
Right? It undermines the creators. It basically says that all the hard work and all the creativity and all the things they've done their entire life to get to where they are to build this beautiful work is not intellectual capital for them. It's not unique. It's not worth money. It's not worth anything. And that's crap. That's wrong. Like, it's worth a lot. Those people put hours in. I mean, I have some friends that are artists that, they spend hours every night honing their craft to the point that you look at their stuff and it looks like a photograph, and it's a hand-drawn, pencil or ink or something else. Amazing pictures.
They say it's 10,000 hours to become a master at something.
That's that one book. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, which makes, on the surface makes kind of sense, I guess. But 10,000 hours is a long time.
It is a long time.
It's 5 years of a full-time job ish.
About 5 years. Yeah. That's the Malcolm Gladwell. That's right. Malcolm Gladwell's. Yeah.
But I'm actually I actually would agree with, with that statement is AI created art or images can't be copyrighted because you're not the one that actually created them. But the images that it used to create them could.
Well, and I'm okay. Personally, anyway, I'm okay if you used a piece of a graphic that I created and you used it to create another piece of art. If I was able to get paid, not a lot, right? So artists get paid for every time their music plays on anything, Spotify, Apple Music, something else. They make pennies on a dollar. They get paid for every time it plays.
And there's stock photography that people have made money off of forever.
Photography, same idea, right? I don't mind if you use that and I got credit and I got pennies on a dollar, but I got paid for my time. I'm okay with that as an artist. But if you just steal it from me, I'm not okay with that.
I totally agree. And that's really where, in my opinion, a lot of this tends to fall apart because just to jump to another article that I found where folks like ChatGPT they're spending around $700,000 a day.
Oh, to run the system, right?
Just to run the system. So like they are at a massive, that is a crazy number to be able just to run the newest model of, ChatGPT 4. I can't remember what the number is, but it's an insane number. And they're pulling in information from everywhere.
Right. But they do generate about $1 million in annual revenue. So they're doing okay with their $20 a month to run that.
Well, but $1 million in annual revenue and $700,000 a day.
No, 1 billion annual revenue.
Oh, $1 billion. Okay. Well, I was like, billion.
What is that? That's that movie where he's got the, pinky up to the face. $1 billion.
But I guess it just comes down to, when they start getting sued and having to pay out for all of these things.
Yeah, that's going to go away.
It's going to get hard.
Yes.
And
so OpenAI right now, this is an August 30th, 2023 article from Yahoo Finance, says that they're averaging about 1 billion annual, which is 80 million a month. And that's what it has. Last year, its revenue reached about 28 million. So from last year to this year, it went from 28 million to $1 billion. Now, that goes to our next show we'll be doing after this one.
Is that actually in revenue? Or is that
it says revenue. Annual revenue milestone would be reached by 2024 of $1 billion from Reuters. Yeah, that's pretty wild. Now, that goes to, like I was just saying, right? Our next show we talked about discussing, which is what happens when the hype disappears on a lot of these things. But, that's, where does it go after that?
Well, do you have to start destroying yourself to remove images or like remove things from your training data set? Because like OpenAI has the web crawler where it's going and it's grabbing everything.
I saw that article earlier today. Did you see that? It was an article that was talking about that ChatGPT might have to wipe all of its data and start over.
Yeah. Well, and and I don't think here in America, we're going to do it because we don't seem to care about data privacy almost at all. But I would expect our European friends to really start cracking down on some of this stuff.
Yes.
Where
there's still the question if they're using data that they shouldn't even have access to.
That's right. Well, just because it all comes down to, again, these kind of laws around what is and isn't copyrighted, just because you can find an image online that is copyrighted that you can't use. Like, yes, you can see it on someone's website. You can't use it.
Correct.
Well, they're just grabbing every image they can, it seems, and using it.
They're ignoring the rules for the usage of that image, right?
That's right. And I would just say that they're kind of they're trying to just be blissfully unaware as to what's actually happening.
Well, there's one of the models, and then I guess this is where it gets difficult, right? One of the models for building, right? So Jasper Art uses I can't even say it. Agrothermatic or themitic brushes. So basically the AI is driving brushes to paint like an artist, right? And it can adjust the canvas and it can adjust the brushes. Midjourney does procedural generation. So it's actually using algorithms to create the landscape and the environment and all the pictures. And it's doing it based on math, basically, right? More than trying to physically paint it. And then Dolly is text-based, right? It's trying to take text and convert that into a physical image. The reason I mentioned the patterns, even though one I can't say, I don't do ebooks for a living. I don't have to speak for a living that way.
That's right.
Is that one of the models, and I forget which one it was. I'm looking at my notes now, but one of the models is based off of looking at other examples and using those examples to create its art. Now, the question I have...
They're all that way.
Well, no. They use components of it, but my understanding is, and again, this is where we're going to talk to our friend David, who is like amazing at this, and he's a specialist in this space, right? But my understanding is there's a difference between me physically taking components of an image or using one as an example to create something else. Now, that goes back to the book that I read before. If the book says, steal like an artist says, be inspired by 3 images, and I create a generative AI that does images that looks at 3 or more images and creates a version based on those, theoretically, that is a new image. Now, if I grab pieces of someone else's image and I use those pieces of another image, that's stealing because I'm physically taking pieces of an image. But if I just use it as a template, my question becomes, is that stealing or is that being inspired by?
So to answer your question, I don't think it's that simple. Because because I would agree with what you said. If you're just ripping things off, then it's stealing.
Right.
But like if you go down to like the diffusion model, which most of these image based are based off of, there's 2 models. There's the language model part of it, and then there's the diffusion part of it. And I'm going to butcher this, but what they're actually trying to do is take an image and add noise to that image.
Okay. And
then figure out how to take that noise away. And what they end up doing is, they've now done that with the image. They can now line up words and then they try to mash them together. But that's not the problem. We're going to talk to David about that, and he's going to explain all the math and how it all works with all kinds of awesome things.
Yes.
But the way that these images are created is you take a whole bunch of those images that you can say, look, here's what this image looks like. Here's what it looks like with a whole bunch of noise added. And here's the steps in between. Well, now if you take a seed image and then you try to remove the noise from it, that's how it creates new images. So it's really not taking any one of them in particular. It's just figuring out how to remove noise using a whole bunch of math that I'm not going to pretend to understand.
Yeah, but removing is different than being inspired by.
But it's not really inspired by any of them. All it's really doing, it's just math.
I know, it's all math at the end of the day.
But you're taking a seed and then saying, take this and you can't see my air quotes, but remove the noise from it.
Okay.
And when it removes the noise from it, it just comes up with what it thinks should be there. So and this is where the law has to catch up, because is that inspiration? If I take someone's copyrighted work and use that to train my model, but my model's not exactly copying it per se, it's just using the data that it can derive from it as part of the training data to denoise new seed images. We don't have laws for that, but
we don't have laws for a lot of this. That's the problem, is the legal system is not catching up as fast as you and I know, having done this for our entire lives. We can move technology faster than the entire world, because keeping up ourselves with technology is almost impossible. Because where if you had a day job not in tech, your environment might change over years, right? Where for you and I, we go to bed, we wake up the next morning, there's 3 new patterns, there's 10 new software products, there's 3 new programming languages. Like, it happens overnight all the time. You know, every client I talk to mentions something new that I'm like, I haven't even heard of this yet. Like, I got to go read something else. Like, so it's different.
Well, I agree, but I think and I'm not saying it's good or bad, but well, yes, things are changing, but the vast majority of people understand them. So, like, if we were to talk about, like, we could take a typical like solution architecture, and I could describe that to someone. I almost said to like a 5-year-old. That's not totally true, but I could describe it to someone and get them to understand it.
You could explain it in a way that it would make sense. Yeah.
That it would make sense. Even the technology parts. Like, hey, like, here's what an API is.
Yep.
Here's what an event is. Like, this thing happens and it sends an event to this other thing, and it then responds back
you
with
use
this structure.
Analogies and things like that enough to explain it in common terms for somebody.
That makes sense. But I've been doing some research on some of this, like the diffusion models and all these other things. I watched a video, and I know I sent you this message last night.
I watched it. Yep.
I watched this, and now my brain hurts. Like we're technology guys. Like, I know this stuff very well, and I look at some of this and go, I don't understand this at all. This is voodoo magic to me. And I think that's the scariest part, is even the people that are creating these things, it is a black box. They really don't understand how it works.
Well,
they
it's almost supposed to work as a black box. Otherwise, you have too much control. And that is part of the problem.
Yeah. Because like you can see, like I watched this one interesting video, and we'll drop it in the show notes, but where, you know, the guy built this model, and you can step through it and you can see the images that it created through its training. Okay. It just keeps getting better and better and better and better and better. And it's fascinating. But how it's actually doing that is super interesting. And I cannot wait to talk to one of our AI expert friends to ask a bunch of questions around some of this stuff. And like, you know, explain this to me like I'm 5, or, you know, explain this to a drunk person. Can you get them to understand?
Exactly.
Right.
Tell my mother how this works. Wouldn't you please?
Yeah. Because we've really, like, this is a shift. This isn't like, while I don't think that AI is going to take over the world, like some people are afraid of, like maybe it will in 25 years.
I think we'll be long gone by the time that happens, though.
This is a very, like, we have made a step in technology that only a few people understand how it really works.
Yes.
And that's the really interesting thing to me.
What I like about it, and your video you shared actually is really good, and we should share it. What I like that it explains is the understanding that it's almost like getting brain fry, right? What he explains in that video that I found interesting is the fact that when you look at images, they have to process every pixel. And if you had to process every pixel, the amount of, think about every neuron in your brain as being able to do one job. So if I had a room of 100 people and I could give everybody one little job to do, we could try to get a lot of things done, but everybody's doing one little piece. And to look at a giant picture that I'd have 1 million pixels, I might need 100,000 or 1 million people to do a small image, and that's too much. So instead of having every person look at one pixel and process it, what was really cool in that video is they figured out how to do it more like a blocking technique that said, I'm going to take a square of 9 by 9 pixels or 16 by 16 pixels, and I'm going to generalize based on the neighboring pixels what I should expect in an area. And that's how it's drawing it. So it took it from like 1 million processing steps to 10,000 processing steps. I forget the numbers in the video, but it was like 100 to 1. And them learning that the neural network couldn't handle it if they didn't, figure out how to manage that model. I think that's really interesting. What I find interesting in this whole field itself is the fact that we're trying to think of it as if it's the human brain with a bunch of neurons, and everybody has a job, and we're trying to do it that way, which we know our brains work closer to that maybe, but not exactly. It's a very interesting model. It's like you said, though, it creates a black box because we're sticking all these neurons into a black box and we're giving them some information going in, and we're waiting to see what comes out the other end, and then we're literally teaching it. So what it does with it, we don't know exactly. We just gave it some general information, some general directions, and then it learns as it goes. That is the fear, and hopefully we're all dead by the time it happens because, we've all watched, Terminator. But, it's how well does it learn and how smart can it get? Because at some point, does that black box actually learn how to teach itself where it doesn't need us for input? It doesn't need us to give it the rules. It figures out based on its own logic, because that's the fear everybody has, is that it truly can teach itself, right? Which is a conversation far out of the graphics we're talking about. But I guess it's important in the same way that for graphical objects like we're talking about, how smart does the AI get? If we get the AI smarter than it is today, can it do other interesting things with those graphics? So forget about stealing graphics and all the negative stuff we talk about. Can it allow, you and I talked about this actually before, is can I have an AI that's smart enough to help me design a movie and create the physical graphical interface for a movie? Or it does pictures today, but why not a documentary? Nah, why not a movie? Like it could change that entire industry. I could turn it up over on its, what is it, head over heels.
Yeah. And it's an interesting topic. And I guess we can kind of shift away from some of the stuff to this. Like, I guess one of the questions comes down to, do people actually want to watch AI generated movies? Like, are there definitely some people that would?
Well, what if it's like anime, like Japanese does anime, right? So it doesn't have to look realistic. It could be more of your comic book kind of idea, your anime kind of idea.
True. I think it's people enjoy a good story. People enjoy good characters. It's one of the reasons why like the superhero movies have lived on forever. And
yes,
you have these now, like this whole cinematic universes around, these different characters and everything else like that. And people love those kinds of characters. They also love the actors and actresses that play them.
Also, those books, the ones that are successful, right? Whether it's a book or a movie, have, to your point, a real. So what I'm thinking of is is Lord of the Rings and a lot of those books, right? They have a real universe. The author created a world, a universe, something that made sense. And inside that world, they created characters with a real backstory. And then they built a story of whatever the movie was or whatever the book was. And you got entranced by the movie, right? Or the storyline. To your point, you love the narrative, you love the characters, you get built into it. Any movie you've seen where they didn't take the time to build that falls apart. Like it might be action packed, but there's no storyline, there's no characters. You don't remember anything when you're done. It was entertaining, but it wasn't amazing.
Or when they go away from the source material and decide to make it up on their own and then wonder why people hate it.
Like the end of what was it, Lord of the Rings, or not Lord of the Rings?
I'm not bitter about The Witcher at all.
Oh, The Witcher! Oh God, let's not even touch that one. Or maybe we touched it a little, but I'm very angry about that.
But so one of the interesting things, like,
but what's the one that played at HBO? I can't think of the name of. That's the other one I'm thinking of.
Wheel of Time.
No, that one is
another one.
Joke all by itself. I don't even want to touch on that. I get myself in trouble. But there was the one before that, the Game of Thrones.
Oh, Game of Thrones, yeah.
Game of Thrones was outstanding right up until the end where they stopped following what the author's book was, telling them to do.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I think it could be, maybe the saving grace for AI is that, you could feed a AI video all of the books and say, turn this into a movie.
Yes.
Like, I mean, that's a really interesting plot, but
well, what if there's books that you like that you know they're never going to make into a movie, but you want to see a movie of that book? That's a really cool use case.
But to the point I was making before, those are human created worlds, books, universes that an AI is creating into a movie. That's totally different than an AI creating something in and of itself. Like, are people going to care? Like, is there going to be an AI generated movie star?
Well, there could be. There already are.
People care.
But there are already people on Facebook that are generated that way. You know that, right?
Well, yes.
Okay.
I totally understand that. There's people that'll
There's
pay
people
them.
on Facebook that are 100% generated. Let's just say generated.
Yeah.
There's people on Facebook right now that are generated. They post pictures. They post text messages, everything else. People follow them as if they're real people. And even when they find out that they're completely fake, they still follow them as if they're real people. They can't tell the difference. It's a really wild, I guess it would be psychology experiment. Like it's unreal.
But there's a difference between following somebody on, Instagram or Twitter versus watching movies that are making, paid movies and all these other things. Maybe I'm totally wrong.
Why? I guess that's my question on it somewhat, right? Because if the movie is generated, and it might be better if it's generated, but if the movie's generated by an AI that knows how to create it in a format that I would enjoy, and it stays true to the storyline of, like you said, a book. So there's a book. It's an amazing book if you get a chance to read it. It's called The Demon. And not demon as in demon from hell, but demon as in computer processor on a mainframe system. Let's say a DEA demon. And the book is really cool. And it's a mix of like World of Warcraft and Apple and a couple different components stuck together, built into a really cool storyline, and the Matrix and some other stuff added. So you can see where they were inspired by some other components. The AI I would expect would do the same. Now, I think that's a really cool idea. If I decided I wanted to watch some wild movie at night, like that book, and they could create it for me, I'm all in, right? Grab a drink, grab some food, sit down, watch a nice movie, great Friday night. And to our earlier discussion, my concern would be, how does it get inspired and where does it pull content from, though? Right. Does it generate all the content, or does it pull it from other movies, which is the same problem with the still images? Is it pulling content for the movie from other movies? If I want to have an epic adventure and I create the storyline for the epic adventure, but all the backgrounds are actually from the Lord of the Rings movies, and they're not going to pay those guys for stealing all of their hard work, well, then again, that's stealing, right? But yeah, I guess maybe it's just the death of Hollywood. Could be, yes.
Right? Because if you have, how do you monetize something like that? And
that's the interesting thing, right? How do you pay for that?
Mm-hmm. So that's to me, the big thing is who is going to pay to do that?
Or is it a subscription type of a service or a one-time service? So,
because so think of the computing cost that it would take to generate an hour-long or 2-hour-long movie from an AI. Like, that's not going to happen instantaneously. Correct. That is something that is going to cost fairly substantial. And are you going to be able to take and sell that and actually monetize it? Maybe. Are movie studios going to try to do it themselves? There's a lot of things we don't know, but the model that we have, some would argue it doesn't work very well. Some would argue that it's okay, but I think if you inject the creation of AI content like that I don't know. Are people going to be that interested? Like if it becomes so commonplace, yeah, I can just go create a movie that I want to watch tonight. Like you also don't have the ability to share because like, oh, well, oh my God, I watched this. Like, oh my God, have you seen the new episode of Lord of the Rings or whatever? Like,
right. But why not? So you and I work for a company that helped a pizza, because I don't know if I can say it, a pizza company create an application that allows us to design our own pizza and then resell it to other customers. And we get a profit ourselves off of that custom pizza we design. So now, if I follow that model, if I design a movie and I use the AI to generate it, and I say I'm willing, right? No different than advertisements on a YouTube channel. If I say I'm willing to share in the profits from the movie and I'm going to put it out on an open forum, and you come across it and you're like, oh, I want to watch this movie, and you watch it and you pay your subscription fee for it. Now I make a couple dollars. You enjoy the movie. The hosting company gets a couple dollars. Why is that not a good model, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wins.
I guess. Yeah. I guess it's interesting.
It's something someone has to figure out, right? So,
well, it's really us as a society. Like, who is going to pay for what?
People love to be entertained, right? That's why our sports figures and everyone else is paid more money than our doctors, our police, our ambulance, and all that. They say all the time, right? But again, different discussion. AI in itself is taking over in many ways, positive or negative. I'm not trying to judge it, just observation. And the reason I say that is I just found an article from Level Up that says AI generated influencers are now making millions. They have on here several different AI generated influencers that, what's it called? Gymshark, a British fitness apparel and accessory manufacturer valued at 1.45 billion, has a partnership with TikTok and Instagram, and they have a virtual girlfriend on there who was earning about $72,000 a week by being the influencer on the social media sites for the brand. So it's a fake person for the brand, and they're making money showing the product, and there's no actual person. So is that good? Is that bad? Like, I don't even know how to judge that. And this is not the only person. There's tons of them out here. Here's another one that she charges more than $10,000 per Instagram post, but she's virtual. What is she charging for?
Wow.
Like, this is crazy. So, I mean, this isn't if it's going to happen, right? AI is here. It's touching on many things, whether it's text-based, whether it's graphics, whether it's movies. But I guess the question is, like we were saying earlier, right? How do we integrate that into our society safely? How do people make money off of it? And how are we honest with it so it's not stealing from each other? Because the fear that I would have off of it is, whether it's video or images, are we stealing to the point that people decide not to be creative? Just let the AI do it, right? Yeah. So all your actual creative people stop being creative. We stop creating unique content and we're expecting the computer to just do it. Because what's going to happen is the computer has nothing to pull from, right? And people themselves stop thinking for themselves.
I guess maybe I might be looking a little too far into the future from my perspective, but to the point you were making, I feel like people are going to reject it.
Okay.
And because it is a dime a dozen, and there's going to be a nostalgia.
What do you mean dime a dozen? Explain that a little bit.
So, yeah. So I think people will become nostalgic for human created content, and whether it's images, whether it's movies, whether it's any of those kinds of things. And because everybody, I mean, ChatGPT is $20 a month. Like, I don't remember what Midjourney is. It's something similar. It's not very much, but basically anyone that has a small sum of money can go in there and have it create whatever they want. And with that creation, everything becomes a dime a dozen. Oh, look, here's a beautiful picture of a mountain scene. Like everything becomes a dime a dozen, because all it takes is a dozen words that you can throw into there and hit go.
But is it or isn't it? Because
I think we're too early in the curve right now, because most people don't have access to AI and to the AI generated content. There's still a mystique to it of like, oh wow, look at this. This is amazing. Like a computer generated this. This is freaking amazing.
Yes, there's that.
And
hype,
like we're still early enough in the curve where the average person doesn't have it. You can still go on Instagram and like, oh my gosh, look at this picture that I created. And people don't know that it's AI generated. Yes. I don't know if it's 5 or 10 years down the road, and literally everything, every person can go and create this stuff. Everybody on their whatever the hell social media is in 10 years.
Yeah, every tool
is all just filled full of AI generated content. Right. And it becomes just garbage.
Or does it allow us to, because,
and I know that's a cynical take, but
no, I don't think it's cynical as much as realistic. I think the question that has to come off the backside of it is, does it actually strengthen some of the creativity? Because as you say that, I think about, again, being a photographer, knowing a lot of pretty amazing photographers, and I don't think I'm great at it, but I know a lot of really good photographers, and their work is so unique that I don't think the computer will create exactly what they create. So if the computer starts to create more, people will do the hobby less, which means there's even less people that are actually being truly creative with that art form. Does that mean the art itself actually becomes worth more, and art in itself becomes worth more in some ways because the computer's taking care of all the basic stuff? So like for my blog, if every image I use is AI generated, that's fine. But then that means I'm going to be bored of it when I decide I want to put a picture on my wall in my house. So now I start looking for that truly unique artist that created me something the computer's not creating. Does that happen or does that not happen, right?
Well, and that's exactly my point, is the world becomes so saturated with AI content that people, whether it's movies, whether it's video, whether it's anything, that you're going to see, you're going to, sorry, someone just showed up at our front door.
Yeah, it's okay. I've had to do that to you twice.
I don't remember what I was saying at all.
I just turned off when you went off to talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about the saturation of all of the art, and then from the saturation of all of the art, we were going to have people wanting to have the unique movies or the unique images, and that's kind of where we were stopping, was that unique movie format.
Yeah, and I think that was just my final point, was like, you'll see people find the nostalgia for the human created things, similar to like the dumb phone thing that we talked about previously.
Oh yeah, good point.
And where it's like, look, I am rejecting these things because I don't believe that it is of value. And when something is so easy to come by,
it loses its value.
It's a supply demand problem, right?
Yeah.
And so it just becomes so cheap, so watered down.
That's why people can't make a living being a photographer anymore. It's already today with regular photography. Everybody has a camera. Everybody walks around with a phone as a camera. So being a photographer is not a full-time job really anymore. You can't really make money like you might have in the past. So this is going to do the same thing. It's going to saturate it so much that you can't make money with any of it.
Yeah. And well, I think it'll be a renaissance of art.
At the back half of it. Yeah.
The back half of it.
Yep.
Like we're going to have to get through, like we're at the very beginning of the curve.
Right.
You're going to hit that saturation. Yeah. There's
when everything looks the same and there's no unique and there's no creativity left. And there's a dying for creativity. There's a hunger for creativity.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's almost like another Dark Ages.
Yeah.
And when what came out of the Dark Ages was the Renaissance. And I think we're going to, we're going to have to go through, we're going to hit it because it's coming. Right. Yeah. And, right now, yes, you're going to find people making 70 grand a week off of AI generated content, but most people don't have access to the tools to create that.
Right.
And people find novelty to it.
Different hurdles, but.
Right. But I mean, that's kind of the end of my point. I mean, I think we've kind of beaten this horse to death, but in some ways.
Yeah, but it's a valid point. And I think there's different things we called out because you have usability rights, you have the legal side of this, you have general usage of the tools. I guess before we jump off though, because we have beaten different parts of it, but I think in a more positive note, because we love being more negative on a lot of this is in a positive note, where do you see this being very helpful? Because I see some of this being useful in creating like advertising and marketing content or something, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you're trying to create a unique story for a product you're trying to do, or maybe I'm an artist and I want to create my next album, and this might be, especially if I'm an indie artist, I'm a small artist and I can't afford to pay a real artist thousands of dollars to write this, or I want to create a proof of concept. Now this tool might work well because I can create a proof of concept that I do bring to an artist and say, okay, these were the 5 ideas I had. Can you now use your creativity to take it a step further? So my question out there is, where do you feel like this is a positive, tool, a positive path?
Well, I think there's a lot of positivity that can come from all of it. It just on a future episode, I'd love to talk about kind of the uses of where we're using this stuff in our day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a lot of really good uses to it right now. And we've talked a little bit about like hyper personalization. It's going to help with a lot of that.
Yeah.
But at some point, those things are going to become too perfect. But I'm switching back negative again. Stop that. Mm-hmm. But it is, I think it's going to help people try to your point, kind of flesh out the ideas that they have, the creativity that they have, like what could I do? But in the end, it's only as good as the information that's put into it.
Fair.
And I've seen a lot of people trying to use the platform in their day-to-day life, platforms like GPT and stuff like that.
Right.
It as always works best when you're trying to take something that was human created and refine it. And it does way worse when you're trying to ask it for something novel.
Like a unique final product.
Yes.
Yep.
And so when it comes down to, what are the benefits? Yeah. To your point. Hey, give me 3 kind of images that look like this thing. And, then figure out what I might want to do from there. Or how do I write better user stories? Hey, here's a whole list of things like user stories that I want to do. Take this and summarize it into some release notes. Like there's a bunch of really cool things that it can do, but it's it's a good, really good typewriter and a good tool.
Well, to your point, in not different wording, right? It's a good assistant. It's a good helper. Give me ideas of what I want to draw. Give me ideas of something I want to create. Help me to redefine a draft of something that I'm writing. Like, help me help myself, but don't just go create it. Don't go off on your own and do anything.
Yeah. Because that's just going to be, in my mind, it's just going to be kind of garbage.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good spot to stop.
I think so too.
We've kind of run the course there.
We beat this up enough, but
yeah.
We definitely have, as we're trying to learn our format for doing interviews. We have a couple friends of ours who really are experts in this field, and we're looking to see their timing, right? Look at their calendar, see if we can get them on here and chat, maybe dive a little deeper into the real nuts and bolts around some of this tech.
That's right. Well, it's been fun as always. Thanks for the great conversation, man.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and as always, thank you, and we'll talk soon.
All right, man. Cheers.
All right, later, Chris.